So today we're going to talk about a lot of the stones that I'm using on a daily basis that are all behind me on this shelf here. We're going to go through NSK, synthetic stones, synthetic polishing stones, and the different natural stones that I use. So I'll start today by, we're going to go through a few of these, but I'll start off by really talking about kind of some of the favorite stones that I like using, and a little bit about each category and what I really use them for. And I'll try to pull out a few of my favorite natural stones. I probably put some water on them just so you guys can see really what they look like. So on the shelf behind me here, I have it all sectioned in categories, and the categories are based on the stones, of course, but also the work that I tend to be doing most often. So just to break it down quickly, the stones that these are all natural stones on the top shelf here, and these are all basically for woodworking tools that I use. I don't do a lot of woodworking. I used to make saya a lot, custom sayas for people, but now I'm basically doing a lot of some prototypes for handles, sometimes work on sayas, and then building a lot of things that are in the workshop. So that's what these natural stones are mainly used for now, and I do use them from time to time for polishing and testing on certain knives, depending on the steel or the blacksmith or the look that I want. After that, we have two shelves here. These two shelves are all NSK. And those shelves are broken down also into the different types of NSK that I use, which is Hakuto and Oboro. And within Hakuto and Oboro, it's broken down into the grit ranges from rough to fine, but also hardness and the softer Hakuto series stones. Then underneath that, down here, this is all natural stones, and these stones are all for polishing. Kind of I would say the mid to final polishing work. So basically you have all from this stone here to about here, these are all Uchigumori. And then from here to down to here, those are all KOMANAGURA. After that, there's a section down here that is all synthetic polishing stones, mainly polishing stones that are made really for work on polishing tamahagane. They do work on more modern steels, modern honyaki and things like that, but they tend to really work well on tamahagane, so that's what I tend to reserve them for. And then the bottom shelf down here is a continuation of these stones for woodworking, and then some other miscellaneous stones that I bring out from time to time. So we're going to start out with this top shelf here. These, as I mentioned before, are all natural stones. Some of them, a couple of them up here, I've had for about 20 years. Those stones that now are mainly used for woodworking, I started off using actually for sharpening, mainly single bevel knives, a long time ago. And now, as my technique and style has progressed, I've kind of put them in another category only for woodworking, so I can really focus on the type of polishing I'm doing now. So on that shelf, a few of the stones that I really like are an OKUDO SUITA, and recently I got from a friend to try out a couple OHIRA SUITA that are really pure, very, very fine, and very consistent in the finish, and those two stones are really incredible. So this is the OKUDO, It's a really interesting stone. It has really unique characteristics on the surface. Some areas are a little bit finer, some areas are a little rough. Compared to a polishing stone, I'd say they're more of a medium grit polishing stone. It's a great stone for kitchen knives, but also for tools. I think it shines more for woodworking tools like kana, but I have used it before. I used it on the Kaiju series, and I still do use it occasionally on single bevel knives. But it's an excellent stone. I've used it many times for many knives. It cuts really fast and leaves a beautiful kind of pre-polish surface that easily allows you to kind of move on to your final polishing stones. This stone I actually got a long time ago from Takeda when I visited him and was with him for a few months many years ago, maybe 2012 or 13. So I've had this for a while and I've used it a lot and continue to use it a lot. So this is another stone that I used a lot over the years. It's a really beautiful OHIRA SUITA. It's got a very unique pattern on it, so aesthetically it's very beautiful, but the polish is really unique and how it cuts is quite impressive, leaving a really black swarf. And the polish and the differentiation between hard and soft steel is really clear. It's very strong definition there, but really nice stuff. And the other one that I recently got from a friend to test out, kind of compare against other stones in that category, is this large OHIRA SUITA. I've just recently started using it. I'm about a couple months into using it, and so far it's just really incredible. It's so consistent, so fine, so buttery smooth, and it really refreshes itself and has this incredible feedback that makes it just so amazing to use. So I'm really looking forward to actually using this more in the coming months, and it'll be sad to see it go. So on this top shelf here is all mainly now I'm using for woodworking. On the top shelf there's a Hideriyama SUITA, there's an OKUDO SUITA, some OHIRA SUITA, a Nakayama Karasu, and a Shobu Dani. And also this stone that actually I've never known actually what it is. So if anyone can tell me, let me know. But I've had it for a long time. It was a gift to me from Takeda. Very unique stone.
Don't you know the stone?
I have some idea, but actually I have no real idea. It's a really unique stone. I'd say the grit range is maybe around 2,000 to 3,000, 4,000 grit. But what's so unique about it has a very hard, definite line that looks synthetic across the entire stone. But it's actually as straight as a ruler. Shosui didn't really know because on the back side of it, it has a kind of karasu look to it. And then the front side is very different. So he wasn't sure. I've never really been sure. If anybody really knows exactly what this stone is, I'd love to know. So after we covered the stones mainly for woodworking on the top shelf, now we're going to move on to these two shelves, which are all NSK stones. The way those stones are categorized and broken up is based on the series of NSK, meaning Hakuto and Oboro, the two series that I use. After that is broken into the grit ranges from 200 to 12,000 grit, and from there it's broken down into hardness and softness. So some of the Hakuto stones are harder, some of them are softer. Depending on which type of knife I'm sharpening, which type of work I'm doing, I'll choose a different type of stone or mix the two series together to create a perfect progression that I feel will work for a certain knife or a certain type of polishing that I want to achieve. So I've covered these stones a lot before in previous videos, so if you're really interested in learning more about the NSK Kogyo diamond stones, you can take a look back at the older videos, or also check Komon's YouTube page and watch the video there on NSK Kogyo diamond stones, and I think we'll leave a link for you in the description below. So the next shelf and the next category of stones that I use is this shelf down here and this one. These are mainly for pre-polishing and final polishing stones. These stones that I'm using are mainly, over the years, I've kind of narrowed it down with the type of technique that I really want to focus on. So all these stones that I'm using from here to here are all Uchigumori stones. So I have the Uchigumori broken down into different types of stones and also categories, similar to the NSK section. I have them broken down into the two types of stones, so MIZUKIHARA and OHIRA. And then from there, they're broken down into stones that are used to transition from KOMANAGURA or synthetic stones that are in that grit range. Some of the Uchigumori that I have are very good at removing the scratches from that grit range, from KOMANAGURA, or from, I'd say, 4,000 to 6,000 grit NSK stones that I use. Then from there, the other category of Uchigumori stones are based on polishing work, moving from those, I'd say, mid-range Uchigumori stones. After those Uchigumori, then we go into the, I'd say, finer Uchigumori that I use a lot to either, that'll be the final finish, or that is a pre-finishing stage, depending on the type of work I'm doing. The next category that I have the Uchigumori broken down into is based on what type of steel they work best for, and whether that's old steel or new steel, and the type of knife, meaning is it sanmai, is it clad steel, or is it honyaki. From the way I've broken down the stones, what I'm really focused on is the technique and how to use the stones. There's of course lots of interesting history and technical scientific details about the stones that I think are really fascinating. But I don't tend to really go deep into those. What I'm really focused on mainly is always the technique, how the stones function, how they perform, and how I can get the very best out of them. So let's go through a few of the stones that I like to use a lot, and I'll show you a little bit of some of the stones that are a little bit finer, some of the stones that that are a little bit rougher in this category of Uchigumori that I use. So to start, this is a stone I use a lot to transition from the KOMANAGURA or the NSK finer stones into Uchigumori. This stone I use almost every type of honyaki, whether that's old, modern, or tamahagane steel. It's a really unique stone. It tends to cut very, very fast, and also is able to easily prepare the surface of the steel to take the finer Uchigumori stones. This is another really unique Uchigumori that works very, very well for some of the different types of modern honyaki. It works really well for blue one, white one, sometimes blue too, but it's really terrible on other steel. It's very scratchy. It sometimes pulls out the steel, but for some reason on blue one and white one, it's just incredible how easily it cuts and the surface that it leaves. I use it often, and I do test it on every steel, every knife I'm sharpening at that time, but I really find it only works on very select steel. The next stone that I use in this category of Uchigumori is this slightly rougher Uchigumori. It's really difficult to say the grit ranges of these, but if I had to, I would probably say around 2,000 to about 3,000. As you use it more, it does tend to get a little bit finer, but it tends to stay in that area. What's unique about this stone is how it reacts on iron, and older iron, and also on tamahagane. It doesn't tend to work really well on modern clad steel that I tend to work a lot with, that's like from Sakai made kitchen knives. So I tend to use it mainly for the older iron. It does cut well, the steel. It works really well on all the Hitachi steels and some of the other carbon steels in Japan, but it tends to really shine on iron, older iron and tamahagane. The next stone in this category of Uchigumori is this large, older Uchigumori. I think I was told it's around 60 years old. This stone has some really unique characteristics because it tends to bridge a big gap or a wide range of steels. I've used this stone on tamahagane, works very well. I've used it on some of the Sakai type honyaki steels, blue one, white one, but I've also used it on Wootz steel, which is really interesting. It's hard to explain, you'd have to really test it out yourself, but on Wootz it's really smooth, really buttery. It really brings out some really unique details in those types of crucible steels. But really, really unique stone. The next stone in this category is this much finer, softer Uchigumori. From the stones that I was showing, we were talking about before, that are a little bit more of the mid-range Uchigumori, kind of getting into polishing and kind of prepping the surface for these finer Uchigumori. This one is much softer than some of these ones. It also cuts well, but that softness helps to really blend your surfaces together and really start to show all the details of the honyaki, specifically tamahagane, and some of the other Hitachi steel honyaki. When you start getting into using these stones, it's a lot of fun actually, because you start to really see the details in the steel coming out. And then you can start to really picture and imagine where the polishing of that knife is going and how it's going to look and how the final polish will look from it. So these stones are a lot of fun to start when you start getting into this finishing state of polishing, and I always look forward to using these. So the next one here is OHIRA Uchigumori. It has a lot of characteristics of OHIRA SUITA, but it's a very, very, very soft stone. It's really nice for some of the older type of honyaki from Sakai makers, Masakuni, Okishiba, and Ikeda. It really, really works well for those steels. Even some of the newer honyaki, it does work well, but this stone tends to really like those older Hitachi Sakai honyaki. It doesn't leave a scratchy surface. It gives a really clear finish at this level of stone. It also blends everything together really easily and starts to bring out some of the detail in the hamon of the honyaki. It's really nice to use. It doesn't work well on all steels, but I tend to use it mainly only for those older Sakai, older honyaki. Mainly, I would say single bevel as well. So the next one that I really like using in these finishing Uchigumori finishing stones, I believe it's a MIZUKIHARA. It's got some really interesting characteristics, but again, doesn't tend to work well on every type of kitchen knife. does work well, very nicely on tamahagane. It works well to also bring out a lot of details. I find that it on the more modern steel tamahagane that we're working with from Tatsuto Yamano, it works really nicely on his steel, on his type of technique. It's a really nice stone to use. It's much finer than some of the other ones I have. It tends to give a really nice clear finish and a really clear definition if you're going to be using it just as a finishing stone. For polishing, as a pre-polishing or pre-finishing polishing stone, before we move into other techniques on honyaki, it's also exceptionally well because it leaves this really clear, fine finish, exposing all the detail of the steel, but also cutting well at the same time. I would say it's not too much of a soft stone. It's around a medium soft. Some areas of it are a little bit harder, but overall it's a very, very clear and even stone. And I really enjoyed using this one. So the next category of stones that I'm using is KOMANAGURA, and then a large group of synthetic sword polishing stones. That's what they're actually made for. They work really nicely on some steels, and I use them because they just tend to be really good at blending and shaping and softening harder steels. And for some tamahagane, they really do shine well, and they don't tend to cut too deep, so the scratch depth is fairly shallow compared to other stones there. So I tend to use them on doing restoration work and other type of work where I really need to only take off minimal amounts of steel and really control the amount of steel that is actually being removed. So in this category of stones, they're basically going from around a 1000 grit stone binsui all the way up to synthetic KOMANAGURA, but also I do have a few different natural KOMANAGURA that I use. I find it really difficult to find good quality KOMANAGURA that suits the type of work I do. So I don't tend to use a lot of KOMANAGURA. I do have some, and I use the ones that I have, but I haven't been able to find kind of the ones that I'm really looking for. With the synthetic sword polishing stones, they go up to the KOMANAGURA. Those are great, but really only work on specific type of steel. In this group of stones, a couple of my favorite stones are this really super fine KOMANAGURA. It just really works extremely well. Unfortunately, I have not been able to find another stone that really matches this stone. It's really exceptional. Very clean, very pure, and the finish that it leaves, very, I'd say almost synthetic looking. It's that clean, that pure. The last stone in this category that's really interesting, worth showing, is this older KOMANAGURA. It's very fine, I'd say almost similar to a Nakayama. It really only works well on very specific types of honyaki and tamahagane. And it's actually very rare to find a steel or a knife that actually really pairs well with this stone. When it does, it's pretty magical. Mainly because it's a harder KOMANAGURA, and how fine it is doesn't tend to match with certain types of steel. I have had it for a long time and continue to use it regularly. So that's a really brief overview of some of the stones that I use. It would take a long time to go through all these stones, and there's actually more. But these are the ones I mainly use and I enjoy using and tend to pair really well on their own and in progressions of stones for different types of knives I'm using. If there is any of these stones that you're really interested in seeing me use, then I can definitely include that in a future video. Thanks again for all the support in the previous videos and all the interesting comments and requests. Don't forget to subscribe and like and share what we're doing. We really do appreciate it. And we'll see you in the next video. So the next stone in this category is this much finer